hours, which is appropriate. So this is satellite vorticity 500 millibar this morning. That nice upper level low that, by the way, I don't know if you heard the news about, you heard about the blizzard in North Dakotas? Manitoba was even worse. About a quarter of the country, or the quarter of the province lost power from that storm. Now, keep in mind that Manitoba is very rural, so they've got, I mean, Winnipeg is by far the largest city, and I think it's 100,000 people. But there's a lot of First Nations isolated communities in Manitoba, and their power grid, like from the wind and the ice and then the blizzard conditions, they're still trying to bring power up to some of those First Nations communities. So I've been, and the reason I bring this up is because I just had a meeting with all the hydropower agencies 2 weeks ago, and Manitoba Hydro is really concerned about that we have a lot of power line in rural areas, and one of these days we're going to get one of these big snow and ice storms. And it happened like a week later. So anyway, so the upper level low is still in here. This thing keeps spinning off very weak short waves. We got one going through northwest PA this morning, just bringing some clouds around. But what is going to be factoring into our weather here over the next few days is this short wave dropping into Montana right now. And then we actually have something interesting down here. It's not quite a tropical system. It never really formed a tropical depression, but it is now this upper level stream of moisture that's starting to come up into Texas. And the models the last couple of days have been starting to hint that this short wave is going to tap some of that moisture. So that could make things a little interesting here on Wednesday, Thursday. Let's go to visible real quick because it is a beautiful day in State College. I picked or just Pennsylvania in general. It is, let's see.
You could have gone right below that link.
Yeah, go below
Close
that
imagery
10 hour.
selection. Oh. Low left.
Where you were before on that US loop?
Keep going.
Keep going down.
Keep going.
Now up.
This.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Now you can choose which area.
Yeah, let's
Do
do
you want viz?
Yeah, let's do this. That's what I want.
You go back to the left, you can pick. On the left
There we
side.
go. That's what I wanted.
Easiest that.
So there's that little shortwave cutting across the Great Lakes. By the way, notice that we're getting cellular convection over Lake Erie, getting that time of year, and that might factor into the forecast for Thursday, which I'll talk about in a minute. But otherwise, got a little bit of fog this morning, formed up in the valleys. That's very, welcome to State College or welcome to Pennsylvania in fall. But really beautiful day other than the far northwest getting some lake effect clouds. I didn't even see if there's any showers with that, but I would assume not. It looks pretty shallow to me. But anyway, so I think the bigger story here is what's going to happen over the next few days, especially our Wednesday, Thursday system. I think that's probably the most interesting thing of the week. So there's our upper level low. Here comes that short wave that's starting to rotate down, and as this drops southeast, it spins up into a pretty nice short wave. And by the time we get into 12Z on Wednesday, it's taking on a negative tilt as it approaches us. So as you know, as an upper level low takes on a tilt like that, you end up with quite a bit of upper level divergence. And you should get a pretty good surface low developing. And sure enough, here on the panel here, make that out very clearly. This thing goes to about 1,000 millibar low, maybe 996, yep, 996. Now, in about a month, this would be a really interesting storm because you'd have an energy transfer kind of system with how much cold air is in place, and is this going to scour out? You're going to get freezing rain with this. Is it going to change the snow? When's it going to change the snow? Well, you don't have to worry about that right now. But I think the bigger thing is as this low comes across, we should have a pretty good band of rain move through this. And the low, it looks like, at least at the surface, that the warm front catches up with the cold front pretty close to central Pennsylvania. So this thing will be occluding as it comes through. So I think we're going to have a pretty rainy day on Wednesday. And then by Thursday, this is where it gets interesting. By 12Z Thursday, we're not, actually, let's see here, 72 hours. So 0Z Thursday. So by 12Z Thursday, we have a pretty good cyclonic flow over the Great Lakes, and the thicknesses are too high at 546, so I'm not expecting snow, but it's starting to time that if you're forecasting around here, been here long enough, by the time you get to mid-October, you got to start looking at 850 temps, because eventually that's not going to be rain. Let's go quick things. This is 6Z. No, that's not what I want. There's 0Z Thursday. And we got quite a bit of wraparound, precip around. The zero, it's 0 at 850, -2s over the Great Lakes. That's probably not even cold for the Great Lakes to get snow, but it's getting close. So, I mean, with it being unstable in the upper level low, I could see someone getting chunky rain. I call it chunky rain mixed with snow. I think the bigger thing here is, I'm going to go to a different view here. This is integrated water vapor transport. We use this a lot in the west because we're watching for atmospheric rivers and we're going to get caught in fire hose out of the Central Pacific. But it works fairly well here too. So there's our little tropical thing down here. And then as this low starts spinning up, you can see there is some vapor transport off of that subtropical-ish thing. It's not great, it's not, I mean, but you do get pretty good moisture transport with this, with the front as it deepens. So it's not gonna, I mean, it's gonna be a quick hitter, probably 12, 18 hours of rain, but I think could get about ½ inch around here, probably a safe bet. And then as this thing, that secondary low develops off the coast, that wraps up quite a bit of moisture, which of course, remember, this is Gulf Stream this time of year. It's still quite warm. We end up with quite a bit of rain over the Canadian Maritimes with this thing. Meanwhile, you can see the wraparound, a little bit of moisture transport on the backside of this on Thursday. So I think basically Wednesday's our rain day, but then Thursday is probably going to be a typical State College. How many strategy days have you had so far this fall? Not many, right? It's been. Yeah, I think Thursday's the Strato. I think it's Strato Q day around here, and then that clears out, and then I'm gonna, because now the other thing I really care about, since I'm here for the yes, I'm here for the whiteout, which will be my first whiteout since I was an undergrad. Hey John, my last whiteout was Alabama, 1990. We lost, and it was a cold.
You need to get out more.
I know, right? I do. So going farther out in time, though, you notice we are in a semi-zonal flow, very progressive. There is something that's got my attention for Saturday, 12Z Saturday. Watch this. We have a weak. The GFS anyway has got a very weak shortwave, very subtle, trying to crash the surface high. I think Saturday morning will be a pretty chilly start to the day. Because we'll have high pressure overhead Friday night. So I think Saturday morning is probably going to be in the mid-30s. It'll be a nice chilly beginning to college game day at Old Main. But then I'm a little concerned. This thing is shearing out as it approaches, but there's no real vorticity with it. But there is this little 700 millibar RH field that comes through. That might be something to watch. It looks like a nothing burger, but when you're talking about college game day and will it rain at night and all that, we do have a little bit of return flow on the southwest side. So I suppose I can't rule out it clouding up, getting some alto Q or yeah, something like that for the game itself. Keep an eye on it though. I mean, these little short waves can sometimes surprise, especially if there's a little bit of a baroclinic zone to work with, but meh so far. The one thing I also want to point out, though, is I'm going to shift, because I like to do this, because I'm, trying to bring a Western perspective to things. The Pacific Northwest, I don't know if you've been, so that's my bread and butter, because we forecast all the stream flows into all the hydroelectric dams in the Pacific Northwest and Southern Canada. So there's 35 dams we're forecasting for, and the energy demand behind that. So energy demand is very temperature driven. Since mid-September in the Pacific Northwest, we've been very wet. It's about the 5th or 6th wettest September on record, which is great because it's refilling reservoirs. And when we had the big power outage in California here earlier this week, what that did is it shut down one of the main interties between the Pacific Northwest and California, cut it off, which normally would be a problem. But right now, we have no energy demand in the Pacific Northwest. So what that allowed us to do is park water behind reservoirs. So all of our reservoirs we're topping off early this year, which is great because you want to have that water in case we're going to get a cold snap sometime this winter. What starts happening here while we're dealing with our Wednesday system is we start getting a series of atmospheric river events coming into the Pacific Northwest. Nothing nothing strong, but all the way out. So over the next few days, we get a series of these disturbances starting to come into the Pacific Northwest, and every 24 hours, we start getting a half an inch to an inch of rain. Well, okay, start doing the math. Wednesday, you're going to get a half an inch to an inch of rain. The next day, we're going to get a half an inch to an inch of rain. Friday, half an inch to an inch of rain. So what this looks like to me is that we're going into that time of year in the Pacific Northwest where our famous Portland rain, Seattle rain is about to begin, and it rains pretty much every day. And while the amounts won't be particularly heavy with any one system, it's a series of them. So eventually, the rainfall is going to total up in here. I just looked at, let me bring up WPC. I just looked at this before press time. At 6.7, let's see. So you do that enough days in a row, and that's 10 inches of rain in the Olympics. That's 5 to 8 inches of rain in the Cascades. Well, there'll be snow will be down to about 5,000 feet, so the volcanoes will be all snow. But this is the time of year where everyone starts buying their ski passes because the snow will start building up here. And even in central Idaho, when you get a little bit farther inland in northern Idaho, the snow, liquid to snow ratios are quite a bit higher. They tend to be about 12 to 15 to 1. So if we're getting 2 to 2.5 inches of liquid over the course of a week, you're getting 3, 4, 5 feet of snow, which, get ready, anyone going skiing, we're starting to build our bases out there. One last thing I wanted to talk about here is I've noticed, quite frankly, that our fall started really early, and you guys haven't had much of a fall at all. I think I see a pattern change on the horizon. I'm going to go out here to the Pacific because part of this, but I don't think all of it, but part of it is related to our little typhoon that hit Japan a couple of days ago. It's not visible anymore at 500 millibars. It's now an extratropical low somewhere up here in the Bering Sea. And by the way, they have hurricane force wind warnings for the Aleutians with this today. But watch so there's this mean trough that's been over the Pacific Northwest forever. These little shortwaves keep crashing into us. Watch this. Watch about here, right around 140, 150. Over time, la-di-da. This starts happening, which we haven't really seen in several weeks. We have not seen an offshore ridge from us probably since mid-August. And it looks like by next Monday, Tuesday, this starts building, and there's very good ensemble agreement. This is the Euro ensemble, but the GFS ensemble's got it too. And yeah, shortwaves crash it because the jet stream's starting to get stronger and stronger. But notice even here at 300 hours, in general, there's more and more ridging starting to develop over the west. And we got about a 4 or 5 wave pattern across the northern hemisphere. If you get a ridge in the west, what does that mean for here? So the good news is that the models are in pretty good agreement on this right now. But this tends to happen this time of year as we get tropical cyclone activity, typhoon activity in the West Pacific. That will arrange the jet stream pattern across the Pacific. Now sometimes they'll build a nice ridge off the west coast, and other times it charges up the jet and we end up with those typhoon becoming extratropical systems and slamming into the Pacific Northwest, and then we really do get big 60, 70, 80 mile an hour winds. But by 300 hours around here, this is what this is looking like. Models and ensemble mean in very good agreement at 500 millibars on generally below normal heights around here. And the 552, most of the ensemble members bring the 552 across the Great Lakes. So I think by the end of next week, 50s, maybe some 40s, stratoQ more often, lake effect becoming a little more common, and then it's just a matter of timing individual systems. So I do think the pattern change is coming. I think this week is probably the last really good, nice week other than our Wednesday, Thursday system, and then the weekend looks pretty good around here, like I said. But I think as we go into the following week, I think out west, we're probably going to dry out just a little bit after this really big wet week. But I think around here it's going to start being a little more active. So that's basically what I had in terms of briefing. The other thing I like to look at is sometimes Van-Julian oscillation activity to see if that's going to affect the jet stream, because if you can get a good batch of convection out here over Indonesia, that can start charging up the jet stream as well. I don't see anything out there right now, although Africa's starting to get a little more active. If this can start propagating eastward, you could get an MJO ripple coming in November, but right now it looks pretty quiet on that front too. And so neutral, so nothing to hang our hat on there. So, yeah. Anything anyone else wanted to talk about? Questions?
Any questions there?
Opinions? What do I think about what? Have you guys made a winter weather outlook yet with Weather World?
No, coming.
Okay.
You
I'm
have
curious
any
what you
ideas?
guys.
What are your ideas?
You know, I'll tell you, this is a hard year because it's ENSO neutral. There were big concerns that we're going to have a blob, and everyone started talking about the big blob of water off the west coast. And let's see, everyone's starting to get worried about that.
What does that mean, a big blob
there
of
last
water off
week.
the west coast?
It's in the North Pacific, and
Yeah, it developed in early September, where everyone was starting to get worried about a lot of warm water off the west coast of the Pacific.
it's not right off the west coast. It's in the north. It's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was, and that's the key. Is that
You need anomalies.
yeah, you're right. I need anomalies. SST anomalies. There we go. That's the one. Let's see. Full global.
It's there.
Yep, but it's a lot weaker than it was. That was a +4 before, and now it's that. One of the things that we've been speculating is that when those warm blobs form in the North Pacific, if they form in summer, the thermocline's really shallow. So if you can get a couple of storms to cross them, it'll churn up. But this is going to get interesting for us. If this sits here all winter, that's going to be a natural propensity for a ridge right around 150,
Yep.
which usually means
Trough in the west.
trough in the west and a cold winter. But if this is just a little further east, this is also a great moisture source. So unclear. Right now, we're leaning toward a wetter than average winter, but we don't know. We're calling jump ball on temps, which is interesting because the other thing we've been having to do is we have a very clear climate change signal starting to show up in the last 5 to 8 years in our temperature records, so that when we do we're already starting to do the calculations for the 30-year average and see what's going to look like when we move 10 years here in 2020. The 30-year average in the west is going to increase about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So we're already starting to think about, okay, so everything that we see in our models, when it's always compared to average, we have to have this adder in the back of our heads. It doesn't mean we apply it all the time, but we're starting to think more and more, wow, we got to be really careful when forecasting below average, because below average is getting hard to do with the old normals.
Yep.
So we're starting to think along those lines, and we're doing long-range outlooks. Out here in the east, I'm very curious to hear what you guys go with, because ENSO neutral. By the way, ENSO neutral winters tend to be MJO dominant, so you end up with big swings because you get a big thunderstorm convection area over the West Pacific that charges up the jet stream. You block the pattern for a couple weeks, you get stuck in it. That's usually when you get storm after storm after storm somewhere, and then it breaks up. And then you end up flip-flopping like that all winter long, and that makes it really, really hard. Because seasonally, it ends up being when you average it all out, it ends up being a pretty average winter. But during those periods of particularly stormy or inactive weather in the Pacific Northwest, at least for Bonneville Power, it ends up on both extremes. Like if we get a ridge parked over us for 4 weeks, everyone panics because our water supply forecasts start dropping, and that's energy, that's revenue. But if we get really cold and stormy, then we got to worry about our grid. Is it going to be ice? Is it going to be snow? Is it going to be wind? What the heck? So it keeps us pretty busy on these neutral winters. So we'll see. I'd watch this. This has been the talk of the town. Like I said, it's weakening, but it's still there. That could really impact things in the winter because you might want to park a ridge out here. And that would be cold west, near above average east. So, but I think it's too early and too early to tell. So that's good. I'll be watching Weather World to see what you come out with. Just don't do the folks down the street. Wet. They've always put wet in the Pacific Northwest, right? Oh, well done. Cold in North Dakota. Well, yeah. 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 Mild in the southeast.
Well,
Well,
they had a funny one for us. I think I screenshot it.
yeah. Don't do that.
Stormy.
Stormy.
We're stormy.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The Great Lakes and Northern Plains were midwinter Arctic cold.
Okay.
We were actually mild.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're stormy.
I think it depends on where. I think this winter is all depending on this. Where is that ridge set up over the North Pacific? And does it keep breaking? Does it stay flat and keep breaking down, or does it pop up? But actually, I wonder if I have a loop of this. Yeah. So it'll take me even 5 minutes to find the loop if you guys want to stick around, but I'll look for the loop. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Anything else, Trevor? All right.
Thanks, Erik.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Erik.